Members, can I bring this meeting, please? Sorry. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Development Committee. I will now read out the emergency evacuation announcement. Should we be required to evacuate the building, would you please leave the building via the entry doors to the hall, continue straight on, go through the 2 sets of double doors on the right-hand side to the car park, which is the assembly point. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by the council staff. Please note that the meeting will be audio recorded. Please switch off mobile phones or turn them to silence, or leave them like me, left it at home. Members, there are 4 microphones on the tables for use during the meeting. When I invite you to speak, please wait until there is a microphone in front of you before speaking, as microphones are needed for the hearing loop and for the audio recording. Where possible, please help by passing the microphones to each other and use the hand gel and antibacterial wipes on the tables if you do touch the microphones. Members, voting will be done on a show of hands in line with the Constitution. I will ask for a show of hands for and against the recommendations, and then for those wishing to abstain from voting. Item agendas 1 and 2, apologies for absence and substitutes. We've received apologies from Councillor David Merrick, and Councillor David Sperring will be substituting for David Merrick. Is there any others, please? I don't think so. I think we've got all the members here. Well, we can't stop the meeting because someone's running late. Thank you. This meeting has to start at 7:30, so he will. When he comes, there is a seat for him. Thank you. Non-members attending, there's Councillor Stuart Wilson, Councillor Wootton and Councillor Cheryl Rowe. You're all at the back there. Thank you. Have I missed anybody? No. Thank you. Oh, right. Minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of July. Are these okay? Can I have a vote to say, please? Any alterations? No, thank you. To receive declarations of interest. Members, if you do think you've got a declaration, please do so through the meeting. Do you want me to change the motion now? Members, before we start today's business, I would like to move a motion without notice to change the order of business in order to take item 9, 20/01041/REM, land north of London Road, and item 8. So 9 is going to come before 8. Have I got a seconder, please? Thank you very much. Can I have everyone in favour for changing this, please? That is unanimous. Thank you. So we don't need that. Right. Agenda item 6 is 20/00332 full land opposite 92 to 102 Windermere. To consider an application for proposed erection of 17 number dwellings, 11 number houses and 1 building containing 6 flats with associated access parking and private amenity space. And it is Mr. Shanks. Could you please do it? Have you got a...
This application is to a parcel of land on the southern side of Windermere Avenue, and although members will recall this went to committee back in December. I've got to put this up higher, it seems. Forgive me, everyone. There you go. It's worth getting the context just briefly because I'm going to show the adjoining development. Members will recall that this area of land, wider area, and it goes off the page, was released from the green belt in your allocations plan. So it was green belt and became residentially allocated, and then since that time there's been a planning permission granted on the larger part of the site, which most members will I think know is being built by Barratt David Wilson Homes. This site tonight doesn't include that that piece of land that's subject to the outline. I think when this went to committee before in December, there was some confusion about what Barratt's had said they would do as opposed to the proposal before you. So just to tidy that up, you'll see that we're talking about this section of land here, and this land here is yet to come before us. These are excluded from the outline permission over the greater site given to Barratt's. So this isn't part of the Barratt site. Think of it as a standalone site. If we can just look at the Mallions Lane development, please, Plan 2. Just to build on what I've just said, our site is up here. This is the development that's currently under construction that I was explaining, and the obligations of this are, if you like, nothing to do with this site. So whatever the developers said they would do here, this developer isn't necessarily bound by that. I felt I do need to make that clear. If we can look at the site layout plan 3 for this application, please. Members will remember that a scheme that's fairly similar to this was brought before members on the, I think it was the 10th of December last year, and members had a number of concerns which are set out in the report that concerning density and the heights of the buildings, etc. And the applicants have gone away and they've adjusted the scheme that you see before you. The density obviously remains the same. It's still the same number of 17 dwellings, 6 flats, 11 houses. But if you think that your policy says that all schemes should reach at least 30 dwellings per hectare, this scheme equates at 37 per hectare. So officers, as previously, support the density. And what the applicants have done have largely kept the sort of spirit of the design of the buildings, but they've looked at the individual criticisms that members had, and they've made adjustments to it. So we'll see that the garden areas on this have all now been made up to 100 square metres. They were, some of these on the lower part here were over 90 but didn't meet 100. They've taken out one house type and adjusted the layout such that the garden areas now all comply with your requirements. We have a plan 3A, if we could jump to that please. If members with a keen eye can see there's a dotted line here, and that is the scheme that you saw in December, the dotted line. And what the applicant has been able to do is to change the heights. They've dropped house type A by 0.4 of a metre. They've dropped house type B by 0.5 of a metre to a height of 9.4. House type A is 8.9 metres in height. And the apartment building has been lowered by 0.8 of a metre to 9.7 metres. If we can go back to house type plan 4, please, house type 2. Members raised the concern about the inability to sort of open a car door in the carport feature. And what the applicant has done, although keeping faith with the main design, they've taken the wall out so that they've got the support with the 2 squares that you can see there. This is a plan view, so they've cut the roof and lifted it off and you're looking down above. But they've been able to attend to that criticism by doing that. I think, have we got a, no we haven't, I thought we've got the design. Yeah, plan 4, is this plan? Yes, sorry, my mistake. Here, look, you can see the opening where the carport is. I thought this was on another plan, but this is all on one plan. There's the opening where they've taken the walling away, and here we see it on plan where they've taken that out. If we go to the parking layout, plan 5, please. This scheme now fully complies with your car parking standards. There was some concern that some visitor parking was to be provided in these plots to the south, and I think that was felt that that the owners of the houses would sort of take ownership of those, not that it would be theirs, but it'd be sort of uncomfortable for visitors visiting another plot to park on almost what was somebody else's property. So whilst they were achieving the garden areas and they were changing the houses slightly, they took those out, and this is compliant with your standards. There's 2 visitor spaces for the flatted scheme, and the 3 required visitor spaces are up here. I know that's away from some of these here, but the Highway Authority does entertain curbside parking. So as a scheme, this is compliant with your standards. Each dwelling has got 2 spaces except the 1-bed flats, which has got 1 space, and you're required to have 4-point-something visitor spaces, so they of course can't have a point-something of a space, so they've made it fine. If we see the boundary treatment plan, Plan 6 please, the applicants have put in hedging and landscaping to give a good setting to the building here and the site frontage, and you'll see that the street areas are enclosed by walling and then subdivided by fences in a typical style. If we can see the Plan 7, the aerial image please. This is a computer generated image. I don't think we had this last time, but I don't know if you can zoom in on that where you can please, Claire. What they've done is to try and show you the development at the back. That's the Barrett scheme, which is already approved and is being built, but they're trying to show you how their proposed scheme would look in context. And you'll see this is Windermere Avenue here. These are the buildings that would front Windermere Avenue, and there's the access road that we saw, that we were speaking to a moment ago. And you'll see the walling around the perimeters of the garden areas that back onto that. Members were concerned about secure by design. In working on these drawings, because these were initially presented to you in December, the applicants have gone back to Essex Police, and you'll see in your report there's a letter of comfort set out at paragraph 4.30 on page 661, that they've had constructive consultation on these changes, and the revised design before you would achieve an appropriate level of certification under secure by design. I get the impression there's various categories, so whilst they can't yet be clear as to which one they would hit, they're saying to you it would get one of those if built. You'll see that the Essex County Council Sustainable Drainage team have no objection, subject to conditions, on the drainage issues proposed. The fact that the county SUDS team recommend conditions doesn't mean that there's a problem with the scheme. It's more for enforceability, that the matters laid down by the applicant as what they should do and will do, if they're a subject of a condition, they can then be enforced. So it's a matter of housekeeping, really. Then lastly, there was the issue about the use of Windermere Avenue legally. Members will recall being concerned that it's an unmade road, but there is public right over it. You'll see in the report that both the applicant and Essex County Council confirm that it's not maintainable at public expense, but there is a right to pass over this street by vehicles and on foot. The Council's allocation plan makes clear that there's no reference that came out, I think, in representations made, that there should be all the development served through the Barrett site. The allocations plan that you have approved actually says that there should be at least 2 entry-exit points into the development of the allocation. The Barrett scheme has an access onto Holbridge Road, Lower Road, and Mallions Lane. This scheme, which is much smaller, accesses into Windermere Avenue. So the development of what you allocated from the Greenbelt as a whole, if this was approved, would have 3 access points across it as an entirety, when you've asked for it to have at least 2. So this would meet that requirement. The recommendation, you'll see, Chairman, is approval. Now, I said earlier at the start to make a clear distinction that this is not part of the Barrett site, but because this is an allocated site, this isn't like infilling you get in other streets and areas. The developers for this must also contribute to infrastructure, just like Barrett. So you will see that there is a number of points recommended in the legal agreement that might be the same as Barrett's. For instance, education contributions, things like this. Now that is because you've taken the land out of the green belt, and then these schemes have to deliver on that infrastructure. Now there are some things that Barrett has done because they're engineering projects, which these people can't can't do. It's already been built, so you can't add to it. But you'll see that officers have gone through the report that where there are outstanding matters or there are monies accrued just based on the number of dwellings, then we're asking that there be a legal agreement, should you approve it, to those points, yeah? And that would be the consistent approach to all the developers of the land. Bearing in mind there is still a vacant parcel to the west of this site that is yet to come before you. And lastly, in addition to the legal agreement, Chairman, the conditions that are set out at paragraph 1.1 onwards. Thank you.
I've got a loud enough voice. We have the agent for this is James Firth. You have 5 minutes to speak, and we'll give you a minute when it's up. We've got a minute left. Thank you. Please start.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is James Firth, Director at Stratton Parker, speaking on behalf of Marden Homes, the applicant. As you've heard, the planning application before you has been running a long time since submission last year. It was first reported to committee in December and deferred for a number of reasons. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to address those concerns. And my client and ourselves have been working hard with your officers, as you've heard, to address the different issues that have been raised. There's been further information and clarification provided on a number of points, and there's been changes made to the scheme. As you've heard, the site, of course, forms part of an allocated site, SCR6, and therefore presents next opportunity to contribute to housing needs of both market and affordable housing. We've undertaken specific further engagement with Essex Police, including a meeting with Angie Pearson, the Secured by Design officer, and the scheme will incorporate secured by design measures that were recommended through those discussions, in particular door entry systems, appropriate boundary treatments, lighting and surveillance within the scheme. The scheme therefore meets policy requirements for secured by design. There's been a design review, as you've heard, and a reduction in building heights across the scheme. The revised information package included a design update document from the architect's DAP, and there's been a reduction in ridge heights taking into account the neighbouring scheme. As you've heard, houses reduced by 0.4 and 0.5 and apartments by 0.8. The apartments have also been reduced down to the eaves to 2.5 storey. And personally, I feel this has resulted in a real improvement to the appearance of the scheme from the street scene and the elevations. So thank you again for that input. The proposals otherwise meet design requirements to avoid any overbearing in distances, and they include shared amenity space, as you heard. Parking bay sizes have all been reviewed, and changes have been made to ensure the parking works in relation to walls, which was the concern previously, through the adjustment of the carports within the scheme. Access is onto the public highway, which has been confirmed by Essex County Council, and there's a letter confirmation provided from them. 1.1F in your recommendation also covers the resurfacing and pavement construction works on Windermere Avenue as one of the number of Section 106 items that's just been covered. There is no objection from ECC Highways. The design review also ensures there is a 100 square metre garden area through changes to the layout for all of the properties. And the scheme layout is therefore policy compliant and does not represent overdevelopment, meeting the policy requirements. A drainage strategy has been submitted. It is considered there will be a low risk of flooding from groundwater across the site and a very low risk of flooding from other sources such as surface water. Due to the type of soil, this is an attenuation solution rather than infiltration using permeable paving and attenuation, and the existing runoff rate of 0.9 litres per second, and the scheme has been designed to a discharge rate of 0.9 litres per second, therefore not increasing the runoff or flood risk from the current situation. And there's further conditions on that, as you've heard. ECC SUDS confirm that this is appropriate and there's no objection. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. With regard to any other matters of detail, with regard to conditions or 106, we will of course continue to work with your officers. We very much hope you are able to support the scheme tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now invite the ward members who are here, and it is, I think we've only got Councillor Stuart Wilson. I don't think we've got any other members, so just non-members, so we've got no one else.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I note from the previous report that there have definitely been some improvements to the scheme, but there are 3 areas that I would like members to take consideration of. The first is parking. While it's true that the scheme now meets the minimum standards for parking, in the vicinity of the area in Windermere Avenue, there's no place or no spaces available for additional parking. So I would ask members to be mindful of that. The second point is to do with height, and as the agent has just said, the ridge height has been reduced, and that's good because this is still the highest point in Holbridge. But I would ask members to satisfy yourself that there are no overlooking issues either to existing properties in Windermere Avenue or to the new properties that are to be built by Barrett David Wilson Homes. The third point relates to the access via the private road, and I contend that the report is actually contradictory in places. Members may wish to look at paragraphs 3.115, 3.116 and 3.117, and in those paragraphs, in paragraph 3116 says, Essex Highways have provided the following response by email. It would appear that Windermere Avenue in the vicinity of the proposal is not adopted highway. The section of road is a private road. Private roads are not adopted by the local authority and therefore maintenance and upkeep are the responsibility of the landowner. And then paragraph 3.117 says that given that the access from a private road, the access rights are a private matter and have no implications on the Highway Authority recommendation. If members were minded to approve this, I would ask that we consider a previous precedent that was set, which was in Lower Road, 66 Lower Road. The case number was 01185/FUL, and this had a very similar scenario. I think members will remember that this was the old bicycle shop on Lower Road, and the access was via a private road, and that at the time the landowner didn't give permission for the developers to have access to the gardens, the parking bays at the rear. So I would ask members, if you are minded to approve it, to put in a similar condition, which is to make sure that you are satisfied that there is legal access onto the site. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Members, does anyone want to do? No, there's no. Oh, is there any? Sorry, is there any other non-members want to speak? Oh, thank you. We'll come back right to the members of the committee. Councillor Sperring. Sorry, Sonia.
Thank you, Chairman. In light of what Councillor Wilson's just said, can I ask for some guidance from our legal department? I'm assuming that they have looked into this aspect and are comfortable with what has been proposed and what has been agreed?
That's right. Can I just clarify the question? Sorry. In terms of, if you're talking about this being, and Mr. Stranks will correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of rights of way and that sort of thing, we don't consider that to be a material consideration in terms of planning, and those sort of disputes, I would say, are separate between the private landowners, if that assists.
Yeah, I mean, subject to us approving this, we're not going to run into a problem that suddenly they can't get access to this site. I assume this has all been looked into, and I'm aware of another issue that we have, and this has happened, and there is a very big site that has to go down a similar sort of scenario, and it works as long as you as planning say that there isn't going to be an issue with regard to either construction and or suitable residents being able to make access to this development. That, I think, is what we need to know. It's no good us saying yes we can and then there'll be a legal issue that they can't make access to it.
Chairman, if I may, what you have before you is the applicants have explored this matter in their preparation and diligence in bringing the application to you. And as a result of members' comments back in December, they've tried to go further and assured themselves. You also have a letter from the County Council, the Highway Authority, who say the section of street that the site fronts, the unmade section, whilst not maintained at public expense, it enjoys rights of passage by virtue of foot or vehicle. So I think the Highways Authority, who we would rely on, though it's not something they administer as such, they're confirming what your applicants are telling you, that they're in the belief they have right of access. Now, without trying to muddy the waters, it wouldn't perhaps be the first time that sometimes when things progress they hit problems. That's the nature of the development industry. But the developers do everything in their power to make sure if they're interested in a site, they're not buying a pup that they can't get no access to. So the applicants were already ahead of you before the application came to you in December, and they've gone further, and the Highway Authority confirming that. I'd like to think members can be reassured that this site enjoys access. I think there may be a common perception amongst the public that because it's not an adopted street, that then only certain people can pass over it, but that's not the case. They're entitled to pass over it, and I think there's something in the application particulars, forgive me, I didn't author this report, but that says that the developers are going to improve the surface anyway. So I think you can be assured that there is public right of passage over this street that fronts the site.
Thank you.
Councillor East.
Thank you, Chair. Notwithstanding the comments that Mr. Stranks has just made, one of the things that I think needs clarification, we have got confirmation from Essex County Council that there is right-of-way on the frontage of this site. But the right-of-way does include then the rest of the road. And I'm just wondering if there is any issue there. I'm not yet convinced, I must be honest, because I like Councillor Sperring, know of another site where a developer developed a very big site, and because of a strip of land that has public right-of-way over it, but wasn't owned by the actual applicant at the time, that they then were denied access to that site, and eventually that large contractor went bust as a result of that. So I am not convinced by what I've actually heard at the moment from the point of view of access being free. On another couple of comments, I don't think the picture that we're actually looking at the moment actually does the applicant any favours. What we're actually seeing behind in the David Wilson's project is well-spaced houses of decent sizes. I think the scale of mass of what we're actually seeing in the applicant's proposals that he's bringing tonight are questionable. I think scale and mass is certainly something that I would be querying about this. Where we looked at the reduction in height of especially the flatted complex, I'm not sure that's come down enough. I know it's come down, but when you actually look at it, it's the central piece of the roof that has actually come down, and the rest of it has pretty much stayed where it was in the first place. So I'm not minded at the moment to agree that this has actually gone far enough in its actual revisions. And that's pretty much all I have to say at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can you pass the microphone to Councillor Stanley, and when after that, Councillor Stanley, can you pass that to Councillor Lawman, please?
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. With effect to what has just been said, is the block that we see in front of us with a large flat roof to the rear, much concerns about that in the size of that flat roof, if it is such. Perhaps the officer could let us know. And also, is there any restrictions for the occupants not to park in the parking bays or the tunnel, or whatever you like to call it, at the side of the property? Is there a restriction for them not to park in the road, and that they must park their cars in those areas that the parking bays are suitable for? And the last thing is, in relation to this, it's quite overcrowded as opposed to the properties surrounding this site. I do feel that it's overdeveloped, and that it doesn't marry up to the existing surroundings in any shape or form. And perhaps a second look at it would be helpful. You say there are 3 ways out from that site, but I can only see one out there at the moment.
Excuse me, Officer Straggs, clarify what you've just said.
Forgive me, Chairman. I've pulled myself onto the punch I was trying to avoid. This scheme, as you rightly see, has one entrance point onto Windermere Avenue. When you considered it back in December, there were objections raised by residents saying that the development of the site you allocated as a whole, including Barrett's David Wilson Homes, should be accessed from the south. They felt that your plan said it must be accessed from the south. Yeah? Now, your plan does not say that. Your plan says that the site as a whole, including David Wilson Homes, should have at least 2 access points. And the point I was trying to make is that it isn't required of the plan we worked to, that the council produced with public consultation, viewed by an inspector. It isn't a requirement that this site is fed from the back, from the south. It's just a requirement of the allocation as a whole, all of the land you release from the Green Belt, to have at least 2 access points. What this scheme does is give you a third in the service of the site as a whole, albeit only these 17 units. Yeah? I think I was trying to correct the concern that was raised by members of the public in the representations. I've possibly messed that up and confused members, but so what you see on the screen is one access point for just this group. But what you released as a whole was required to have at least 2 access points. This third access point satisfies your policy because it creates a third access, albeit just for these 17. I've hopefully made that clear, I hope, Chairman.
Thank you.
Can I come back, Chair, please?
As long as this is a really heavy agenda, Councillor Stanley, so we need to move things on. So unless you're not going to repeat yourself,
I'm not going to repeat
that's
myself.
what I'm just asking you not.
I mean,
Shall we-
I'll
No, I'm not saying you
go
can't.
along
but
with
I
it
would
then.
like.
I mean, if we haven't got the time to do
I
it,
didn't say
then
we hadn't. I said we've got a heavy agenda. I just didn't want things
Well-
repeated.
by
So please carry on. Then we go
Thank
to
you.
Councillor Lawman.
Thank you. We did mention that the Barrett Homes was a separate development from the off. So why are we including the Barrett Homes development in this site in the first place? I'm getting confused here because you're dealing with 2 sites and yet we're talking about one site, not 2 sites.
Councillor Stanley, we are actually only talking about this site, and it was just
No.
it was just noted that Barrett site there is 2 extra exits. So this
Well, I
was-
know, that's what I said, I know that, but
No.
is it to do with this site?
No,
That's the point.
if you read your papers on item 6, it isn't we are not discussing Barratt Homes. And
Thank
if you had read your papers, you would have known that.
Well, I did read the paper, that's
Well,
why I
obviously you
brought it
didn't
up.
read them properly.
I did.
Councillor Lawman,
Could I have
please.
my other questions answered,
How many more you
please?
got, please?
Well, I had another two, which I'll...
Right, okay, you've only got 5 minutes. Everyone on this table has only got 5 minutes to speak.
Yeah.
Right, okay, and you've only got about a minute and a half.
Well, I'm just waiting for the answer.
Well, I've just given it to you.
Oh, you're going to give me the answer about parking, are you?
No, I've just given you the one for Barratt Homes. I asked the one about the parking.
Well, I've already asked that when I started. So if nobody's listening, what's the point of
Well,
me
we
talking?
are, but we just wanted to make sure you'd got all your questions in one go, and then they can be answered. I was going to ask if the officer would like to answer all the questions in one go.
Oh,
Instead-
okay.
right, would you like to carry on and ask what Councillor Norman's questions are?
If you didn't mind, Chairman, I'd rather just, while they're hot, I'd just rather
Yeah, of
try and deal with
course.
these. You can, as I say, take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. All we can do as planners is make car parking spaces available in the layout. What we can't insist upon, there's no power to make people stop parking on the street unless you start putting regulations down, traffic, WL lines, things like that. So we make the provision available in the decisions, and it's hoped that people will use their parking space, but that doesn't stop them parking on the street. If it's convenient to do so, or pizza deliveries, things like that. There was a point raised about flat roof, and I think it was to do with the flatted building here.
Yes.
I'm at a loss. I can't see flat roof other than architectural detailing. You'll see this like ridge line and 2 hips down. That's a fully ridge roof. I can't see a large expanse of flat roof, but the sort of the dormer features and the castellation in the articulation of the building, they might have flat roofed elements, but they're minor in relation to the wider scheme. I think that's the scope of the questions that I was hoping to address.
Thank you. Councillor Lawman, please. You've got one in front of you, Councillor Lawman. Somebody say you've got one in front of you.
Yes, thank you. Is it on? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wearing this, so you bear with me. I can't. Anyway, so some of the questions are relevant to what I was going to ask, so I'm not going to sort of double date this thing. But it became obvious to me that we were talking first of all about the accessibility of Windermere Road, and you was all going on about over this part, that part. But really, surely, if there's a point of legal point of accessibility, that's for the applicant to prove to us that it's not for us to guess or just take for granted. Surely we should have something, if we're going to look at this, we should have something before us to say, this is what we've done, this is what we've achieved, this is the legal status. It's not for us to sit here and play snap. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's my point on that one. But what I wanted to say was, and it comes back to this accessibility issue, there's only one to this site. Now, you've asked for 2 on the other big site. We won't go into that, but one assumes that's for health and safety and everything else, in and out and everything else. But if there was an incident, because if it's on an unadopted road, no lawful parking restrictions can be put in. So I'm not, that's my understanding. So if someone was to park a big lorry at that entrance, the whole site is blocked. Similarly, if there was an incident, any incident, even digging the road up to block that entrance, how do all the people get in and out, especially in an emergency situation? I note on the far right side of it, it goes onto land or whatever, but I don't know, I'm not familiar with the area. So does it go into where a road can be taken out of that side on the right-hand side of that drawing you had, the plan, the site plan? You got it? Was it number 3 or 4? That, see, you come in for the main one, this end's all blocked off with trees because it goes onto the Wilson estate, but what is on that side? Can they not take another opening there to take it back to Windermere Road? Anyway, that's my questions. I just thought, and that's all I want to say, really.
Thank you, Councillor Lawman.
Very quickly, Chairman, if we could go back to the location plan. Windermere Avenue here, which we're looking at this plot, there's an alternative access out if this were ever blocked, leads you into Grassmere. It's a sort of a traditional gridiron, so it wouldn't be inevitable that sometimes places get blocked because of, say, a house fire or something like that, Lord forbid, but this isn't landlocked by access. Most traffic will probably go that way, but some may choose to go out through that way. If we could look at the estate layout for this one, please. I think, as I say, I've trying to fix problems from the last time you saw it. I think I've created new... No, it's all right. This is a single access point, and all it does is serve this small group. But when you saw it before, there was concerns about the sort of legacies from the Barratt development, and that's what I was hoping to fix for Members Line. There is no permeability from this into the Barratt site. It's a small cul-de-sac. Potentially 17 unless you exclude the ones on the front, but I take the point. But that's no different to schemes we see a lot in this committee, small cul-de-sac developments, infills. The Highway Authority doesn't object to this layout and its impact on the strategic network.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. It seems that we're moving the goalposts here. At the last meeting that this was brought up at, the last committee meeting, we raised some concerns that we had. They have been addressed as far as we can see. We're now bringing up further concerns, and to me it just doesn't seem right. There are many cul-de-sacs in our area, and are we going to have them all changed? Of course we're not. I would like to propose that we take this to a vote now for approval. Thank you.
I would second that.
Right, members, you've heard that we've had a motion so for approval. Can I have a vote on if you would... It is proposed the planning permission be approved subject to the completion of legal agreement under section 106 of the Act for the heads of terms set out below. Can I have a vote on this, please? All in favour? Please keep your hands up until Sonia's counted. All against? Any abstentions? Members, this has been approved. 8-4, 4 against, 1 abstention. Thank you.
Oops.
Right, members, we're going on to item 7, Michelin Farm, Arterial Road, Rayleigh. And I believe it's Katie who's going to... Sorry? Who's going to be the officer to do this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application... Sorry, Claire. Can I go on to the location plan, please? This application site is situated at the junction of the A127 to the south and the A1245 that goes northwards there. The application site is that edged red on the plan on screen, which is part of a wider site under the same ownership. So the application site includes the vehicular access proposed onto the A1245 to the northeast corner and then runs parallel to the railway line along the site's northern boundary. The western boundary adjoins a field, whilst the southern boundary adjoins Amwood Lodge Business Park, here, which consists of a surface car park and a cluster of fairly modest buildings. A single residential dwelling also borders the site's southern boundary in this location here. So the whole site, the red and the blue, save for a section of the southwest corner here, benefits from outline planning permission for commercial development. Reserve matters has been approved in this part of the site, edged blue, and development there has commenced. If you can take you to the site layout, please, Claire. So the proposal is for a single large building for B2 general industrial and B8 storage and distribution use. This building will be centrally positioned, so is shown here, so it's essentially in the main a large rectangle. And there's HGV parking and access to the building to both the north, there's HGV parking here and to the south here, and then HGV access to the building to the south and also to the north. Vehicular access would be here via this access proposed onto the A1245. A smaller building in this location here is proposed as a gatehouse building just to control the access road within the site. Car parking will be proposed here just to the east of the site and in this location just as you enter the site off the access. Pedestrian and cycle access will be provided to the south, from the southern boundary, so at this point here. You can take you to the master plan, please, Claire. So this master plan is illustrative only, but shows the proposed development in the context of the wider development of the site. So the two commercial buildings here are those subject to full consent, and they're under construction. I can take you to the warehouse elevation, please, Claire. 4, I think. Thank you. So external facing materials would mimic those used on the buildings in phase 1, already under construction. And the main roof, shown in the section here, would be a series of shallow pitches, and then on the elevation here you can see that there's a parapet surrounding, so just shielding those shallow pitches from view. 2 flat-roofed sections, so you can just see these projecting here. They're at a lower height. They're fairly modest, would feature to both the northern and southern elevations. Some glazing, so I don't know if it's this section here, so some glazing would feature to the building, and the windows would serve offices within the building, and then this northeastern corner is the main access to the building, and this would feature more glazing. Can you take to plan 6, please, Claire? Sorry. Thank you. So this is the landscaping plan, and so the soft landscaping will be provided and includes native hedging, so it's going all around the perimeter down here. And then significant tree planting is also proposed around the perimeter. Can I take you to the fencing plan, please, Claire? Thank you. So the types of fencing proposed are shown on the right-hand side of the plan here, and the top one is 2.4 metre high paladin fencing, and that's proposed to the whole of the site perimeter, and then some within the site itself, cordoning off this area of car parking from the main warehouse building. This hit and miss timber fencing is only proposed just to delineate the refuse store here. The other fencing proposed is this 5 metre high acoustic fence. And if you can just zoom in to this part of the southern boundary, please. It's difficult to see, but it's very clear on a plan on the computer screen. So the acoustic fence would run along this line here, so all the way along the rear garden boundary of this residential property here. And I would point out as well, in the course of the application, a number of these HGV parking bays here have been removed from the layout. There would be an additional area of soft landscaping provided in this area immediately north and adjoining the garden to that residential dwelling. Can you show the... yes, thank you. So several 3D images have been provided by the applicant, and these are illustrative only, but help to give an impression of how the proposal would appear. This image shows the northern elevation with the proposed gatehouse building in the foreground. I'll take you through a few photographs that were taken fairly recently at the site to help provide context to the proposal and the site location. So this first photograph is taken within the application site, looking east towards the northeast corner of the site over here, where the proposed vehicular access would be. The buildings under construction towards the right-hand side of the screen can be seen, and then this towards the left is the railway embankment. You can just scroll down just a little bit, sorry. This second image shows the location of the proposed access onto the A1245 in the foreground, so the access would come off here and then skirt into the site and along the northern boundary. This image shows the rear elevation of Anwood Lodge, so this is the residential property bordering the site, and it shows it in the context of the building already under construction in phase 1. And then the last image shows the rear garden of this residential property looking northwards, and the application site then is beyond that boundary fence. The allocation plan, please, Claire. Yeah. So members, this site is allocated for employment use under policy NEL1 of the Council's allocation plan, as can be shown on the extract on screen. But part of the site here is allocated for a separate gypsy and traveller accommodation use, and that's shown in the next extract. So if you could just go to that one. So this is the same site essentially, but this is showing the Gypsy and Traveller site allocation within the allocation plan document as well. So the site's subject to 2 different allocations in the adopted development plan. So one of the key considerations in the determination of this application before members tonight is the conflict with the adopted development plan, in so much as it would result in the loss of the Gypsy and Traveller site allocation. Detailed consideration of this issue is set out in the committee report, but in summary, in the first instance, applications should be determined in accordance with the adopted development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise and would justify departure from the plan. National planning policy requires consideration as to whether a reasonable prospect exists that an application would come forward to develop out this allocation for the intended use as a Gypsy and Traveller site. The applicant is clear that they do not wish to develop the Gypsy and Traveller site here. The only option would therefore be that the council seek to acquire the site, and this would likely involve compulsory purchase. As set out in the report, this process involves a number of stages and likely very significant cost to the council. At this stage, however, compulsory purchase of the Gypsy and Traveller allocation cannot be ruled out, and the council leader and executive have indicated that compulsory purchase should be explored here. Officers have therefore concluded that a reasonable prospect does exist. In all other respects, the proposal is, however, considered acceptable. The proposal would create significant jobs, which is a clear benefit of the scheme. Although the building would be very significant in scale, it is considered acceptable in this location, and harm to residential amenity of that single property that borders the site would, we say, be appropriately mitigated. Following publication of the committee report, the applicant's agent has submitted a letter which raises a number of points they wish to comment on. The comments include their view that an alternative employment scheme could not be achieved whilst retaining the Gypsy and Traveller allocation at this site. Their view that a reasonable prospect of an application coming forward for a Gypsy and Traveller site here does not exist is reiterated, including reference to a compulsory purchase process being unlikely to succeed, including as a result of Rochford Council having to demonstrate in the process that all necessary resources to deliver the project are likely to be available within a reasonable time scale. Also in the letter of importance to note to members this evening is the applicant's proposal for an increased financial contribution to £470,000 as opposed to the figure stated in the committee report. This would be towards alternative Gypsy and Traveller accommodation in the district in recognition of the urgent and pressing need for such. The recommendation, members, remains one of refusal for the reason as stated in the published report.
Thank you, Katie. I'd like to ask Mr. Tim Rainbird, the agent, to speak. Again, you have 5 minutes, and we will let you know when there's 1 minute left.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Development Committee. I'm Tim Rainbird, the agent speaking on behalf of the applicant and owner of Michelin Farm, Star UK Rayleigh Propco Limited. I would like to start by thanking your officers for the professional and diligent way in which they've approached this complex planning application. Your officers are recommending refusal on a single ground, namely a departure from your development plan. I would like to spend a few minutes explaining why I strongly believe you should respectfully consider granting planning permission. There is no doubt that this is a very difficult application to judge, but at the heart of these proposals lies an undeniable boost for the local economy. We've all endured a very challenging 18 months, and you have an opportunity this evening to facilitate the creation of up to 800 new jobs. Those jobs will deliver a post-pandemic economic injection, resulting in a £16 million direct investment and approximately £1 million in business rates. As you've heard, the majority of the site is already allocated for employment. Your officers accept that significant economic benefit would arise from the proposal and that this economic benefit should be afforded significant weight. Despite this, a number of factors have tipped the planning balance against your officers recommending approval. Those factors are the belief that the land allocated for Gypsy and Traveller accommodation is suitable and deliverable, a possibility that an application will come forward for Gypsy and Traveller accommodation, and a belief that the economic benefits will be delivered from alternative employment development whilst retaining the gypsy and traveller allocation. The site has clear suitability and deliverability issues, and fundamentally it will not meet the needs of the gypsy and traveller community. The site is surrounded by major roads, the East Coast Main Line, and shadowed by high voltage pylons. The site also has no road access and is believed to be heavily contaminated. These factors indicate that the land would be inappropriate for new homes for either the travelling or settled communities. The site also has no gas, electricity or sewerage connections. Establishing these will require an investment of more than £1.3 million. These issues have been raised by planning inspectors when determining appeals relating to gypsy and traveller accommodation in the district. Those inspectors have also heavily criticised the reliance upon Michelin Farm allocation, given it does not offer private traveller site provision or provide a choice of sites to meet the needs of the gypsy and traveller community. As a consequence, the Council's current policy approach conflicts with national policy. In terms of a possibility of an application coming forward for gypsy and traveller accommodation, the site has been allocated for nearly 8 years. The Council has not worked with the current or previous site owners to bring forward the allocation. The Council does not own the site and would have to secure it by compulsory purchase, as you've heard, an extremely costly and uncertain process. And the owner of the site does not want to bring forward the gypsy and traveller accommodation. This possibility cannot therefore be judged to represent a reasonable prospect, a point which underpins your officer's conclusions. Finally, your officers believe that the consented outline scheme will deliver economic benefits. This belief has reduced the weight afforded to the economic benefits proposed. This is founded upon the belief that the consented scheme will come forward if this application is refused. This is simply not the case. The commercial impact of the policy GT1 allocation is such that the consented development will not proceed. The Development Committee therefore need to weigh the potential loss of the employment benefits when considering the application this evening. The gypsy and traveller use of the land will sterilise the adjacent employment allocation. The opportunity before you this evening is both significant and compelling. The application responds directly to strong market demand. It will deliver 30,000 square metres of modern, high-quality industrial warehouse floor space, presenting a unique opportunity for the district. There is nothing of this scale in the area, and its presence would present a clear statement that Rochford is open to new business. Turning down this application represents a significant reputational and financial risk to the Council by saying no to jobs and investment because of a gypsy and traveller site in the wrong location that may never come forward. I therefore urge you to support this planning application this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And before I carry on, I have noted that Councillor FD, Williams, Sperrin and Smith, I've got non-pecuniary interests for being on the executive. Correct? Anyone else? No? Thank you. Other non-members, do you wish to speak on this? No? I will then bring it into the committee. I've got a couple of hands here. But it was that Councillor FD, then, oh, sorry, it's got to be Councillor Norman because he is the Ward Councillor. Yep, no, it's got to be Councillor Norman because you're the Ward Councillor.
Yes, one's a point, a comment, and the other's a question, which I am a little bit vague on. As I see it, whatever you stand on this, we're talking about traveller community, and we have an obligation to provide a site for this community. And my understanding is, at the time when this was selected, a lot of work went in by other members to sort out this particular site, and for a very good reason. And then we have this application come along, and suddenly we seem to be talking about the travellers as though they were secondary to this. And I feel quite strong about that. I'm not a major supporter, but I do think we're talking about people. And we have a legal obligation, as I understand it, to provide a site. If we do away with this site, regardless of all the circumstances I've heard, we've got to find another site. And that will be quite traumatic, I should imagine, because there'll be opposition wherever you go. But that's my first point on this, really. But I have a question which I could be put right, because I'm a little bit vague now. I remember a couple of years ago now, we worked with Highways with the refurbishment of the Rayleigh Weir, and they were putting in roads coming off the A130, coming across to that road, their exit, by the railway there, and they raised X amount, 94 million or something, to progress this, all to do with Rayleigh Weir. I know it's highways, but it was my understanding where that exit point is there, that's where the road was going, and they were going to go across the road and then turn right towards the A127 where a new lane was going to be put in. You know, some people might remember this, but to my knowledge, that was all you remember. That was all agreed, and it was all going to go. I know they've taken their time, things are like that, but my understanding, that was approved for them by the highways people. It's nothing to do with us. So my question is, how does this interfere with that road?
Councillor Norman, can I take all the questions?
Oh, yeah.
Will you
Happily,
be
yeah.
all members, can we take all the questions and then ask the officers to answer them? If Katie's got the questions laid down, I'm laying them out as well. Sorry, Councillor FD.
Thank you.
Chairman, I find it, coming from all the other side of the district, I find it's very difficult to place in my mind the scale and the context of this site. So I'd actually like to propose a deference to have a site visit.
Well, can we just do the questions?
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
And then we'll come back to you for, is that a motion you're putting through?
Yes, that's a motion.
Okay. I'll second that. Okay. Right, so, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. So if we're talking to the motion for deferment, I'd just like to explain my reasons why I feel I might be able to support that. Clearly, we have had the importance of the traveller site explained to us by other members, and there is a long history to the generation of that site. I think now that we're in the position we're in, a deferment would give members the opportunity to have that site visit and to see the practical location of it. I think it will also give officers time to give consideration to the issue around the financial contribution, because just listening carefully to the speaker that we had, mentioning a value of £400,000 contribution, but equally a few moments later saying it would be about £1.3 million to develop a site. £1.3 million in that location or another location, it's still £1.3 million. So there's a bit of a mismatch there that needs further exploring. And then when we get to the issue of highways, the report is thorough and comprehensive, but when it comes to the Highways Authority, we've simply got the line that they support and some conditions that they suggest. I think with such a significant location, members would require further understanding of how the highways solution would work, and obviously not directly part of the application, but I still think relevant to our consideration is the proposed development of the Fairglen interchange, given the absolute proximity and the impact of any changes there on any proposed further access to the main road from the site, particularly around peak times on such a busy road. I see that the Highways Agency are more concerned about further impact on junctions much further away, but clearly with the number of workplace parking slots that are on the application, the detail of how the proposed highway solution would work and the detail of a signalised junction and the impact of that, I do believe there is a lot more detail required there. So I would be more than happy to support a motion for deferment with possible site visit to further explore those options. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reeves? You've got one. Councillor Norman, can you pass, as requested, can you pass the slide over, please?
Okay, thank you. Listening to all of the arguments and all the points put forward, it seems as though the biggest stumbling block is the obvious one, is the allocation of the Gypsy and Traveller park. Now, the developer has actually suggested putting money to this, but I don't think that is really going to solve the issue, because from memory, the council had quite a job trying to find a site for this allocation. I wonder if we could propose that the condition be put on this.
No,
that if
no, you can't, because we're talking to the motion.
Okay,
Sorry.
all right. Well, once you... All right, if
Sorry.
you want me to bring it back to the next one, then I'll bring it back to the next
Yeah.
one, but it might actually then
Yeah.
cause more complications. I think actually the motion to defer is probably preemptive, because the site is pretty obvious. I mean, anyone who goes on that junction is going to see it. I mean, the development there is absolutely huge, and you cannot fail to understand where it is.
Can we, if you've got any points you'd like our officers to explore, councillors, let them know, and then that will be sorted out until we come back. Let's have us after the site visit, and then we obviously will do. This will come forward. Have you any points that you need to be explored for this site visit?
Sorry, it might be worthwhile just understanding about a condition. It just might be useful if you were going to make a point about a possible condition. Theoretically, I know we're talking to a motion of deferment, but it might be useful if we are deferring, if that is the end result, that then we're clear about everything that we need to sort of consider.
Thank you.
What I was going to suggest is that it seems like a logical thing from a business point of view to put across as a suggestion, because one of the things that the council has found a real problem with is actually finding a site for the Gypsy and Traveller accommodation that we need to have as part of our government allocation and requirements to provide. It's all very well the applicant coming forward and saying he'll give a huge amount of money, but if we can't find a site, then we're still stuffed. So I would, the thing I'd like to explore is the possibility of, instead of actually requiring a financial contribution, that the actual applicant, as part of the agreement to proceed, presuming that goes ahead, that they actually find and purchase another site equivalent to this. The actual site itself, I don't think is practical to develop, not in its present place. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Stanley, then Councillor Norman, and we'll take, Councillor Foster, then we'll take a vote on this motion.
Yeah, just thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
With reference to page 7.13, paragraph.
Are you talking to the motion?
To the motion, yeah. Which will tell us that that the site is really one that hasn't, there's nothing on it, it's just bare land. And I just wonder that just going to the site, and it's quite visible up there, when we see where the Gypsy and Travellers site needs to be located, is that there is nothing there. There is absolutely nothing there. And what I'm asking is that even if what are we aiming to do once we see it in reality?
We've had a motion put forward to have a...
Yeah, I know, but what are we going to go there to see?
We won't know until we see it. I mean, I've never been there, so I would like to see the site and see how it's proposed. As we've been to other sites where there's been a bare bit of land, our officers have given us a plan, and then we can discuss it. And this is what we're trying to do tonight. So
right, okay. So I get the idea of what's been said.
pleased about
But
that.
I've got to ask, can I ask for another deferment, please?
Well, we're asking for a, no, we're working on this deferment.
Yep.
So we've got a motion forward, it's been seconded, that we defer it for a site visit. And then once I've allowed people to speak on this, so our officers know what points they would need clarified, then we'll take a vote, yes or no, for a site visit.
And then another deferment can be made.
Why
can
do
it?
you want to make another deferment, please?
Well,
What on? What are you going to defer the deferment?
I would like to make a deferment to this proposal to find out exactly where the council is in this purchase of the land,
Right.
because without that, we're looking at, we don't know what we're looking at.
Councillor Stanley, it was
I don't
said
know.
it could be, it was, if you, it has been stated, the land could be purchased, compulsory purchase, not as it is. So that is not a stage we're even looking at yet. We are looking about this development to see what has been proposed by the applicant, to see if it's, and Councillor FD has said he would like to put a motion forward to have it deferred so we can all have a look at the sites. I personally would like to go and have a look at the site. It may just be a rough piece of ground, but I still, even if I hadn't, regardless of the Gypsy and Traveller site, I would like to see the site, how it is laid out, like we have at Cherry Orchard.
Okay.
And that is what we're doing tonight. Okay. Who else have we got to speak? Because then I want to close this. Councillor Williams, please. For a site visit.
There are things that we will explore as a result of site visit.
Just a site visit. Sorry, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I shall be brief.
Is your microphone on?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, it is now.
My question is, have the applicants offered an alternative site for the Gypsy and Traveller encampment? Thank you.
That question can be answered at a later date, or can you do it now?
I'm conscious that I haven't got back to any questions at all. I think they were saving them for the end, but in the midst there's been a deferment that needs to be voted on at some stage, but at some point I suppose I need to get back to the questions that have been asked. Yeah, at the end, whenever.
Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question to be discussed at the site visit, if possible. The applicant has been putting stuff out suggesting that the site is not suitable nor deliverable. I'm quoting RDC as having some view on that. So I'd like to discuss that when we have the site visit, please.
That can happen? Yeah, that's no problem.
Thank you.
Right, members, can we have a vote on who for agreeing to have a site visit, please? Site visit deferment. Get it right. Against? Any abstentions? So that's been carried. We're going to have a deferment for a site visit, and it's 9-4, 3 against. That is carried. Thank you. We're taking item 9, as stated at the beginning of the meeting. Yes, sorry. Right. Well, I'm getting conflicting reports here. Right. What are we going to do?
Well, we're not having a discussion.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Katie, sorry. Yep, let's have conflict.
Okay, right. So I think, Councillor Lawman, the first question was about highway works that were surrounding the site, and I think, yes, there is, it's called a Fairglen Interchange, I think, is what's been referred to, and whilst I haven't got the precise details of what is involved in that, clearly the Fairglen Interchange works are very close to this site in part, and the Highways Authority, when they made the recommendation, in terms of the access being appropriate, have taken those works, those wider works, into consideration. And I think Councillor Smith sort of asked as well if these additional things could be maybe explored, perhaps in an addendum that officers can put together prior to the next hearing of this application and then following the site visit. And I think Councillor Smith was asking for the impacts of the proposed access here and how they affect or the Fairglen Interchange works, to just give members clarity about what those impacts might be, and just reassurance from the Highways Authority that they've been properly considered and they're still happy with this access. That's my understanding, but I don't have that further detail to give you right now. I think the other question I had down was, have the applicants offered an alternative site? That, no, in short. I think maybe we'll leave it at that for now. I don't think I had any other questions. I think there were other comments, and I've noted down a few things that are maybe for us to look at on an addendum to give members more information about certain things before it's heard again.
Thank you very much, Katie. No, we can't go back forward now. We're just... We can't... We're not discussing it. It's just the questions that were asked from Katie. No, you're not. We haven't got a date for... We've got, as you know, the procedure. We have... You do know the procedure. We have a date for the site visit. And then when we've had the site visit and our officers can get the additional information, they will then put it on to an agenda for us to come back to discuss it. And then it will be discussed again. Right, members, as we stated right at the beginning, we're going to go on to item 9. Instead, so if you can shuffle your papers around a little bit, I do apologise. So this is item 9. It's the land north of London Road and West Rawworth Industrial Estate, Rawworth Lane, and it'll be Claire. Oh, hello, Claire.
Hello. Hello.
Good evening. We'll present the officer's report. Thank you, Claire.
Good evening. This is a reserved matters application for the construction of a care home in association with the development approved for up to 500 dwellings by outline planning permission at land north of London Road and south of Rawworth Lane, Rayleigh in 2016. The reserved matters for consideration are access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. As you can see from the location plan, the site is a small parcel of land here, separated from the wider London Road site by the Rawworth Lane Industrial Estate Road. If I have plan 2, please, Katie. So this plan shows the site in context with the wider outline application. So we have the application site allocated for non-residential uses located here to the northeastern corner of the wider site. And as you can see, we've got the residential parcels, some of which are already partly being constructed at the moment. You can see attenuation basins and wider amenity space as well. But this is the site that we're talking about in the wider context of the site allocation. We'd have plan 3, please, Katie. So the proposal is for a 60-bed care home across 3 floors with associated landscaping to the boundary edges, as you can see all around here, landscaping all around these edges, an amenity space to the west. This is where the amenity space will be located. Access into the Rawworth Lane Industrial Estate Road to the south, so you'd come down the Rawworth Lane Industrial Estate Road and then there will be the access to this point here. And we've got parking as well to this southeastern corner of the site. We have plan 4, please, Katie. So this is a 3D visual of the building proposed when viewed from London Road. The building would act as a feature building to the London Road development using mixture of materials and elevational treatments. Move on to plan 5, please, Katie. So this is another 3D visual just viewed from the residential development site looking towards the amenity area. So as you can see, this would be where the amenity area is located here, and this sort of section here is, and sort of backwards, is the wider allocation residential development site. And finally, plan 6, please, Katie. And this is a 3D visual from within the site looking across from the parking area. So this would be the parking area here. This is actually the main entrance is sort of inside the site here. During the course of the application, revised plans were provided removing a substation that was considered to interfere with the root protection zone of a protected tree, and the overall height was reduced to accord with the height parameters of the outline application. Some other design and minor layout changes were also made. So the key material planning considerations are access, design and appearance, landscaping, scale, layout, drainage, planning conditions and RAMs. If we can go back to plan 3, please, Katie. Thank you. So with regards to the access, can you zoom in a little bit more if possible? Thank you. The supporting information indicates that the main vehicular and pedestrian access to the site is direct from the road which serves Roars Industrial Estate. This proposed site access would include a linkage with the existing pedestrian footway on the eastern side of the Roar Industrial Estate Road. So as you can see here, this is the existing pedestrian footway here. So the site, so someone could come down this footpath here and access the site in here, pedestrian-wise. The access provides visibility of 2.4 metres by 43 metres, which is the recommended distance for a 30 mph zone, and that is shown by the orange type hatching that you can see here. A swept path analysis has been undertaken which confirms that a refuse vehicle can access and manoeuvre within the site. And again, you can see the swept path analysis here, so an example vehicle manoeuvring within the site and still coming out and forward here. County Highways do not object to the proposal, subject to conditions, and the proposed access arrangements are considered acceptable. Looking at design and appearance, move to plan 4, please, Katie. So the overall visual impression of the building is that on the basis of its T-shaped layout, it offers visual interest on all elevations, being multi-aspect in its outlook. It is considered that the stepping of the building line on prominent elevations help break up the massing, and the character features such as bays and gables to the main elevations soften the overall massing of the building and provide visual interest and contrast. Material usage includes red multi-stock brick with cladding, finished in 2 colours of dark grey and white pearl, and smooth grey slate or tiles to the roof. It is considered that the proposed development would form an attractive feature building functional to its purpose and use. Looking at landscaping, if we could have a look at plan 3 again, please, Katie. So due to the relatively level topography of the site, no banks, terraces or earthworks are proposed as part of this development. The site has previously been cleared of vegetation and trees, and the existing band of trees and vegetation situation adjacent to the existing footpath are of high amenity and ecological value, which will be retained and integrated into the site landscaping scheme. So that's that section you can see here that currently exists and will be maintained as part of this proposal. A variety of hard and soft landscaping is proposed, as shown, all of which is considered acceptable. We'll go to plan 5, please, Katie. So the maximum ridge height proposed is 12.5 metres. Officers are satisfied that by reason of its scale, particularly its height, that the development is within the defined parameters of scale set at outline planning stage and aligns with the height of the development set adjacent to the west. The footprint of the building with its T-shaped design is considered acceptable as a feature building such as this. Given the separation distances, it is not considered that the scale of the development would cause harm to the visual amenity of the area, nor the amenity of any property in the Burnham Way. The building is not considered to be out of character in terms of height and mass, with other houses and developments along Roars Lane. We'll move back to plan 3 again, please, Katie. So looking at layout, the layout has been carefully considered so that the public access to the east of the site links round to the footpath, which provides a safe access onto Roars Industrial Estate. There will be a safe and secure southwest-facing garden activity area already identified here. And dining and lounge areas are served by patio and terraces leading out onto an overlooking communal garden space. There is a refuse store which is considered to provide sufficient space for the storage of refuse at the site. So that refuse store is located here. It is not considered that the development, by reason of its layout and given its degree of separation from neighbouring properties, would result in direct overlooking or overshadowing of neighbouring properties to the east in the Burnham Way. The parking layout shows the provision of 24 car parking spaces accessed via a central area, which would also be used by service vehicles. Revisions were made during the course of the application to ensure that the parking spaces meet the preferred bay sizing and to increase the number of spaces to the 24 figure. The quantum of parking proposed is considered acceptable. A cycle and powered two-wheeler store is provided to the south of the building, so that's in this location just here, which would provide adequate accommodation for these modes of transport. Overall, the proposed layout is considered acceptable. Looking at drainage, details have been provided as part of this application to address an initial holding objection from the lead local flood authority. However, the outline application has conditions requiring surface water drainage details to be agreed, and this would still need to be addressed separate to any details provided as part of the current application. Renewable energy, so conditions on the outline application sufficiently control this. And looking at conditions in general, various conditions relating to highway matters, the hedgerow to the eastern edge, requirement for a walkover by an ecologist, and compliance with the construction management plan are suggested, to name but a few. And then finally, looking at RAMs, as the proposed development is a C2 use, which is distinctly different from a C3 use, it is not considered to fall within the scope of the Essex Coast Recreational Disturbance Avoidance and Mitigation Strategy zone of influence as relevant development, and no mitigation is considered necessary. This application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions as detailed within the officer report.
Thank you. We've got no members. Any other members? No. Councillor Lawman, you're the... No, it's Councillor Stanley, isn't it? Sorry. Have you, would you like to say something? Would you like to take the microphone? You want to go?
First of all, there is a public right-of-way pathway across the site from Royal Lane to the industrial estate. Is that going to be kept, or and what manner is there of upgrading it with the site by the developer? Obviously my main concern is because that's actually a bowl effect land, and that's where most of the water goes from Rory Flame when it does rain, and I'm concerned. I know there is a separate plan for the surface water and what have you, but I think we need to be vigilant on that, very much so. That's the reason why we've asked Countryside to put in more ponds than is necessary, because of that area that does actually have a lot of water retainment. I'm fully in agreement with using this parcel of land for such a development. I think it's a good idea, although I'm a little bit concerned on the height of the buildings as relatively to other buildings close by in relation to the Park Laburnum Way development. Could the officer give me a height in relation to that park development, please? Thank you.
Now, do you want to answer them now, or do you want to answer them all in one go? Okay.
In relation to the public right-of-way, so yes, that won't be impacted by the development. That will be retained, and we do also have a condition which was suggested as well, condition 16, which requires it to be upgraded. Now that will be in a manner which will then be between the applicant and county highways to determine in terms of how that actually works, because it will be them that obviously will then be in control of the public right-of-way. Surface water drainage, to confirm, the Local Flood Authority have come back and said that they've removed their holding objection to the application anyway as part of this, but it's the outline applications that really deal with the more finite detail of the drainage and condition that detail on the whole wider site, which encompasses this as well. So they still will be addressed as part of the wider outline application, separate to this. And it's still controlled by that. With regards to the heights of the buildings, I do note that the flats that are being constructed on the wider site were 12.3 metres, so we're looking at 12.5 here with the care home development. I can't actually tell you a height of any of the neighbours in Laburnum Way. That's not something I actually have the information on, I'm afraid, in terms of comparison. But they are considered to be a reasonable distance away, in order that I don't think you'd see quite an extensive massing difference between the two because of the sort of separation distance between where the proposed care home is and the Burnham Way houses. Is an officer perspective on it, as concluded really in the report. But the actual, I can't give you a height on the Burnham Way properties, I'm afraid.
Does that satisfy your question?
Can I come back on that, please?
Yes, of course you can.
Thank you. There is a if you like, an end of house face that is on that side, which is quite, and they've developed obviously the top floor. So in relation to this building as being 3 floors, that is what's happened to the house is actually 3 floors. So if you understand what I mean, because they've developed the loft, but nevertheless, it's still a house with a loft, if you get. And I'm looking at the height being a little, somewhat half a metre, maybe higher than that development. Is there any way we can get that reduced a little bit? To fall in line with the line through the
I mean, we've already, as part of this current application, when it was originally submitted, it was already a greater height than we're currently looking at. In terms of scale and impact, officers' perspective, because this is designed to be a feature building within the site of the London Road development, we are, as officers, happy with the size and scaling that we are currently seeing in terms of the proposal on the site. That's the officer's perspective on it in terms of the height and massing.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I've spent some time with former Councillor Hudson over the years, and I distinctly remember him talking about ditches, verges and gullies on that site, running from that site and going across the road, and this looks like an opportunity to resolve some of that long-term infrastructure. But I'm a little bit disappointed that we're potentially looking at houses there. It's a site that strikes me as absolutely prime for retail, but we've got the application that's in front of us, so that's what we've got to deal with. From what I've seen in the outline, I'm not enamoured with the quality of the design, because Rawrath Lane is a prominent entry into the town, and I don't think that the style and quality of the design there quite justifies that. Obviously, it's not the threshold entrance to the town now. The Wolseley Park development has taken that, but still, it's a significant location, and I'm a little bit disappointed there. But the one thing within what we have before us is if we could possibly just show the boundary treatment on the Rawrath Industrial Estate Road. It just strikes me that given the 3D view, if possible, please, that and a little bit further around. It strikes me that given the nature of the majority of vehicles that will be using the industrial estate while it's still an industrial estate, the height of that boundary, given the height and the bulk of the vehicles, just doesn't really do it justice. You can see, I think maybe fencing to possibly 1.8 metres, but I think a solid boundary as high as you could reasonably get away with would be a good amendment to the conditions that we've got in front of us. But essentially, in planning terms, there aren't too many objections that we can make to it. But I would like to seek advice and possibly further member support on some further treatment to that, that boundary bordering Roarth Industrial Estate Road. Thank you.
Councillor Rafferty, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I'm going to talk about parking. Page 9.23. If you look at 3.78, and correct me if I'm wrong, Claire, it's 24 spaces are proposed, or was it 28? Now, at any day there's going to be, they say, 32 staff take time shift. So where the others going to park, where visitors going to park, the nearest bus is actually goes to Chelmsford City Centre, so what about local people want to work there? The other bus stops, nearest one is 1.6 kilometres away, walking distance, a 20-minute walk, and there's another one which is 800 metres away, which is not really good enough. Okay, in the summer where you can see what you're doing, but if you're on a day shift finishing 6, 7 o'clock in the dark, that's not good. It's got cycling provision there, but no cycle route or marked out spaces anywhere near it. It seems to come down to parking again. I know you say it's acceptable, but I don't really think it's acceptable. Thank you.
Yes, I'll come back on Councillor Smith as well while I'm on. So the boundary treatment, we did actually start with fencing along that edge, and as officers we encouraged them to provide a more sort of attractive, I suppose, edging along there. But it's certainly something that if we're not happy with what we're currently seeing in terms of the 3D visual, we can adapt the condition to reflect that we want something different along that edge to be agreed by us as officers. We have got a landscaping condition anyway, so we can adapt that to incorporate that as well.
Would you want member support for that? Or?
I definitely think it's important to get something that's attractive and works on that edge, being a corner plot location. At the moment, I think what we're seeing, I wouldn't say as officers we would necessarily object to, because we got to a point where we'd discussed with them that an alternative, and this is what they came back with. So we concluded that we were happy with it. But if members feel that they want something differing to that, then we can adapt the condition to consider that.
Do you want to vote on the members for a condition?
So it's an existing, there should be an existing condition on landscaping anyway. Let me have a quick look through hard landscaping. Yeah, so condition 8 we've got on soft landscaping. So it's just that soft landscaping approved landscape plan should be undertaken within the first planting season. So we could just adapt that to include with it in there, and boundary treatment to the edging fronting Roarth Lane and into the industrial estate to be submitted to and agreed. Something along those lines within, if members felt that necessary.
Members, have we got the support for the officers to do that, please? Can I just have a quick show of hands to say you support the officers on that? Very good. Put the support there.
Okay.
Thank you.
And on the matter of car parking, as you'll see within the report, we went into quite a bit of depth in terms of assessing the car parking and its adequacy on the site. 24 spaces they're proposing. Our parking standards refer to a maximum figure. So I suppose from an officer point of view, it then does make it quite difficult for us to sort of really argue an entire quantum, really, because we've got a maximum figure that we're working to rather than the minimum. They provided evidence, the applicant, of other care homes that they have seen throughout the country that have provided this kind of accommodation. They consider it appropriate. County Highways don't object to the quantum proposed. Whilst we've got a condition with regards to upgrading existing bus stops proposed, not locating anything new, but upgrading existing, it's considered from an officer perspective that we don't feel we can go any further in terms of the parking division, and we didn't think it would be a justified reason for refusal here. That's officer perspective on the parking.
Want to come back, Councillor Stanley?
Please, if I may.
Yeah, if you can, because you've done once, so we usually just, because of the time, we just do 1 minute.
Okay, so is it the highway's responsibility for the bus stops and as such, or is this part of, is it part of the developer's development, if you like, to make these bus stops available?
So bus stops are in the control of county highways. It's just a matter of whether sometimes we will impose conditions as advised and guided by county highways as part of applications where necessary to mitigate harm by a development. So in this case, county highways have suggested some improvements to existing bus stops within the area. We've considered that as officers and consider it is appropriate and reasonable to impose and require that as part of this application.
Thank you. No other person? So I'm going to put a motion through from the chair. The recommendation is it is proposed that the committee resolves that the reserved matters be approved subject to the following conditions, and I'm not going to read them all out, because there's far too many. Have I a seconder, please?
Second that, Chairman.
And also, that includes the amendment with one on the boundary. Okay, can I have a vote on them for acceptance, please? Any against? So that's 12 for, 1 against, and that is carried. That's approved. Thank you, members.
Chairman, may I with some embarrassment request a short comfort break?
Of course you can. Then I can have a quick walk with this crutch to set my hip going. Thank you very much. We'll have 5 minutes. This is agenda item 8, land north of London Road and south of Rorath Lane and west of Rorath Industrial Estate. And it'll be Mike Stranks which will present the officer's report.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is to the countryside site, but a different part of it. If we could jump straight to the next plan, please, Claire. And if it's possible to zoom out, I'd be grateful. That's great, thank you. We're just looking at a simple issue tonight, Chairman, which is the strategic landscaping, the outline permission that's been granted includes, amongst other things, the presentation to the council of the sort of strategy to landscape the site. The actual components of the landscaping, like the species density and things like this, are actually reserved as conditions normally cleared by officers. So you've got a straightforward, I would like to think, application here, which you've seen something like this before for another part of the site, and we're now dealing with the southeast corner. This is the edge of the Rorath Industrial Estate and some housing down here, which I think is off Victoria Avenue. This is this strip of land buffering the industrial estate, and then in the corner here, the communal areas of allotments and what have you, and it goes on off the screen up to the access point. So just to run through, they're proposing in amongst that formal 2-metre wide pathways in bound shingle service with mown pathways as alternatives, the use of meadow grassland for species diversity on other parts for habitat and to complement the watercourse and vegetation that runs through part of the site, the use of tussocky and wetland grassland areas. I think you've seen before that some parts of the development, they've got low ways as well as digging ponds. They have depressions in the soil to take surplus rainwater, and then there's certain grasses that favour that relief. The use of native scrub, particularly in this bottom corner, there's a reason for that because it's next to the communal areas of the allotments, the play area, a kickabout area, and other provision, youth facilities. So there's a communal orchard as well in the, here is the scrub, there is a communal orchard amongst that. So there's a feature around the communal uses of the site, as well as a belt of woodland trees and mounding there. Another feature of this, where if those with a sharp eye can just see a pink straight line there, that is a acoustic barrier fence, and that's put in together with the use of trees and mounding. The two features complement each other, the fence and the landscaping, to mitigate noise. There's also ecological areas. There's one area on the side, and further to the south, there's no need to go there on the screen here, but there's a pond on the south side that's outside of the site, but it's combining the landscaping in here to enhance the landscape corridor and therefore enhance the species diversity. The proposal would include 1.8 metre high green mesh fencing, weld mesh fencing around the allotments, and the recommendation, Chairman, is approval subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thank you very much. There are no members of the public speaking on this item. Does any of our non-members attending want to speak? That's a no. Our ward councillors are Councillor Stanley. That's it. I think you're the only one, aren't you? Councillor Stanley, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The question that I'm going to ask is that how does the allotments how do we get onto the allotment site from the Roarif Industrial Estate? I thought that there was a opening from the Roarif Industrial Estate. At the moment, there is an opening which I seem to see that they're using. Is that not practical any longer in the corner? And also, who is going to mow this meadow grass and keep the area tidy? Because it looks like there isn't a access point anywhere down there for equipment to do such. I just wondered if could we ask for an access point somewhere along that side at all? Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, what we're dealing with is like one piece of a jigsaw.
Yeah.
So I'm at some disadvantage that I think we've not sought an access from Roarif Industrial Estate, but in amongst here is a footpath. Okay, so there are pedestrian links, but you'll see there's a vehicular access out this part here. And you mentioned about the maintenance of the site. It will be done by a management company, and their compound is there. Is that there? Yes, that's the management company's compound.
Couldn't read that, sorry.
No, I've struggled similarly. So actually this like communal area, which I was alluding to at the top, there's a number of features around there as well as the allotment. This is the corner where the management company would be based, or at least have their equipment. And my understanding is the whole site, the residential development, these aspects, the other landscaping areas, etc., they will all be administered by a management company. So they will have access throughout the site to the open areas. They will be based in this corner, and the access, there's parking and cycle provision for the allotments also here. So the access presumably comes out here somewhere into other parts of the development that have been agreed. But I haven't got a plan that jigsaws all those together to show you. So I'll perhaps ask if members can trust me that the access for vehicles comes through here, but there's other permeability through footpath linkages through the site. That's if you're happy to carry your tools and things over your shoulder, as it were. But there is vehicular access. You can be reassured of that.
Councillor Stanley, on page 8.7, 3.33, it does give you the whole information about the car parking spaces, cycle spaces, and it also, the last sentence says, the management company storage areas is also accommodated in this area. So it is in your package. If you know,
yeah,
again,
I'm
if you
trying to visualise it,
well,
Chairman.
Perhaps we can't visualise a piece of ground that we can't see. But if you want a site visit, we can go and have a site visit to see it, if you're asking for that.
No,
I'm just asking, if you can't visualise it and you would like clarity, we will defer this and have a site visit. Is that what you're asking?
No.
Right, thank you. Just want to make sure we're clear on that.
No, I'm clear on that now. Thank you.
Councillor Eaves.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick one on my experience that I've had with Hockley allotments. I don't see any provision for water on the allotments. That was a very, very protracted issue at Hockley, and we could perhaps circumvent that by making that a condition of this approval. Thank you, Chair.
Members, in agreement to ask the officers for a condition to make water on the site. Can we have a vote, please? Just to make sure we're all clear. Arthur? Councillor Williams? Right, that's unanimous.
Chairman,
Thank you.
may I interrupt again? Is the council in contact with the parish that is being asked for
That isn't a planning issue. That's got to be taken outside.
Yes, I'm
Right,
just
so
wondering if the
perhaps
officers
we
have
could
asked.
Yeah, well, perhaps we could ask that out after
Oh.
this meeting, because that is not a planning issue, what we're discussing tonight. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Eaves, did you finish with what you were saying?
Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to... Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Sorry, Jack. Sorry, Mr. Lawman. Sorry.
It's all right.
Sorry, I do apologise.
No, I think you've already answered it. All I was going to say is who's paying for all the management? Who's covering all that cost?
That doesn't matter. That's
So we're just going to build something and let it go?
No. With a management company, if
All
you
right.
refer to other papers, it is the residents, etc.
It's an extra
Yeah, right.
tariff.
There is a recommendation.
No, the tariff.
There is a recommendation. It is proposed that the committee resolves that reserved matters be approved, subject to the following conditions. And again, I'm not going to read them out. Can I have
Plus the water.
Oh, and obviously plus the condition with the water, as per Councillor Eaves and agreed by all members. So could I have a vote? Oh, sorry, can we have a seconder? Councillor Sperring. Can we have a vote on for acceptance, please? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. The last item on the agenda is item 10, vote 1. This has been referred from the weekly list, and it's the demolition of 7 Hillside Avenue. There are no assigned presentations, no presentation from the council that called it in. Is there any outside? Oh, yeah, what do you? Sorry.
It's all right.
Oh, I've got five
It's all right. Don't worry.
Oh, sorry, I've taken some time. Oh, I do apologise.
No, that's all right. So this application is for the demolition of an existing dwelling and the construction of 2 detached 4-bedroom houses with associated external works and amenity. As you can see from the location plan, the site is located to the eastern side of Hillside Avenue here, within the residential area of Hawkwell. The site borders other dwellings to the north and south within Hillside Avenue and to the east within Bosworth Close. You see it's surrounded by dwellings here. If we move to plan 2, please, Katie. So this is just a photo of the existing dwelling, which is a detached bungalow on a reasonable sized plot at the moment. Move to plan 3, please, Katie. Thank you. The proposal is to demolish the existing dwelling and construct 2 detached 2-storey dwellings as shown here. So you can see the 2 that are proposed in this location here. New vehicular crossovers would be created onto Hillside Avenue to serve the dwellings. Each dwelling would have an external depth of approximately 15 metres at its deepest point and width of approximately 7 metres. Approximate heights would be 5 metres to the eaves, 8 metres to the main ridge and 7 metres to the ridge of the front wing. Materials would be red-faced brickwork at ground floor with upper walls in white painted render with grey plain roof tiles. The key material planning considerations are impact on character, impact on residential amenity, garden sizes, impact on highway safety, sustainability issues, trees and ecology. So impact on character, the proposed positioning of the dwellings is not objected to in principle. However, the plot width distances would be less than the 9.25 metres per detached dwelling, and the dwellings would also not achieve a 2 metre separation between the 2 proposed dwellings as required within the council supplementary planning document 2. So those distances are what we're referring to here. So the distance across the actual plot widths here are considered to be under our requirements, along with the separation distance between the 2 dwellings here. The proposed layout and setting would not have a good relationship with the surrounding area, with the lack of separation between the proposed dwellings and the lack of plot width resulting in tightly packed development at odds with the more spacious character of the locality. The proposal was considered to be contrary to policy CP1 of the core strategy and policies DM1 and DM3 of the Development Management Plan and the MPPF, and this represents an opposite reason for refusal here. Looking at impact on residential amenity,
The site borders other dwellings to the north and south within Hillside Avenue and to the east within Bosworth Close. The 45-degree test to ensure no unacceptable overshadowing occurs has been adhered to. The development would not be considered to give rise to overlooking or overshadowing of neighbouring properties. Looking at garden sizes, both of the properties would be provided with rear private amenity spaces of 185 metres squared and 188 metres squared in excess of the required 100 metres squared, which would satisfy the outdoor amenity space requirements as set out in Supplementary Planning Document 2. Impact on highway safety. So the site provides the necessary 2 resident parking bays per dwelling to the appropriate sizes within the parking standard document, and the 2 new vehicular accesses are considered acceptable. No visitor parking is proposed, but on small developments such as this, it is normally acceptable if adequate parking is otherwise provided per unit, which is the case here. Only 1 space overall would technically be required. This is not considered to represent a justified officer reason for refusal here. There were no obvious on-street parking issues that would result as witnessed during the officer visit to the site. Looking at sustainability issues, all new dwellings are required to comply with a new national space standard as set out in the Technical Housing Standards, Nationally Described Space Standard of March 2015. The proposed dwellings would exceed the requirements. A planning condition would be recommended if planning permission were to be approved to ensure compliance with the necessary water efficiency standard. Looking at trees, there are trees and shrubs situated to the eastern and southern boundaries of the site. Some of the trees and shrubs would have either been removed or pruned. The trees are not protected, and whilst they offer some visual amenity within the site, they are not considered to be of any significance, and therefore the works to the trees are considered acceptable. And then finally, ecology. The proposal is within the scope of the Essex Coast Recreational Disturbance, Avoidance and Mitigation Strategy, RAMS, as it falls within the zone of influence for likely impacts and is a relevant residential development type. It is considered that mitigation would, in the form of a financial contribution, be necessary in this case. The required financial contribution of £127.30 per dwelling has not been paid to the local planning authority. It therefore remains unclear as to whether the necessary mitigation would be provided for here, and this represents a second officer reason for refusal. This application is recommended for refusal for the 2 reasons outlined in the report.
Thank you. Councillor, we've got a lot of you here.
Yeah.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. The reasons for refusal have been quite clearly explained to us by officers. I did note Councillor Mason in her reason for referring mentioned car parking, but officers have visited the site and there weren't any particular issues, so that would not be sustainable. So I am quite happy with what's presented in front of us, and I'm quite happy to move the reason for refusal.
Have I got a seconder for that? Councillor Shaw. Mr. Shaw.
I second that we the proposal that we refuse this.
I'm allowed to explain that. That would be because I think it will affect what you're proposing.
Well, we've got a motion at the moment. Yeah, you want that?
You can speak to the
The reason being why there was no parking issue actually seen while you were there is, number one, the actual property itself is empty, and the 2 bungalows that are opposite are also empty due to bereavements. So it's given you a misleading position. I live at the top of the road there, and I can assure you there is a parking problem down there. And once these are developed and those 2 bungalows get actually taken up, that will become a parking problem, guaranteed. So, I mean, I'm actually minded to say that we actually include parking as an issue for refusal.
Just to sort of come back, obviously it's totally accepted that a visit to the site is a snapshot in time anyway of circumstances, and things can change, and there is impact. I mean, I just yes. Oh, sorry.
Can we have an amendment on the motion for refusal and a seconder? Right, Councillor Stanley, can you redo your amendment, Councillor Eaves, please?
That the parking standard should remain as stated in our policy, and we should have enough room there for the 3rd car on each site.
Thank you. Now, can I have a vote, a seconder? No, we have a seconder, that's Councillor Stanley.
Can I come back and just show a photo I took of the site, just to sort of give a bit of a context of this parking before we come back on that? Is that allowed? Bearing in mind what Councillor Reeves has also said about the situation. Is that allowed?
Necessary now?
I think it just...
We've done this, we've got an amendment in. Would it be actually necessary to show an empty road?
I think it just shows that perhaps even with the circumstances that Councillor Reeves has described, so with the 3 dwellings that are perhaps not occupied, even taking that into consideration, there still wasn't a lot of parking from the other properties within the site.
We're just talking about this one, and we've actually got it as refusal. We're not actually discussing this now.
We're discussing an additional reason for refusal, aren't we? So
right.
I just want to make sure that we're clear as to whether that's definitely a justified 3rd reason for refusal. That's the only reason I sort of wanted to perhaps just reflect on that photo.
Yeah, okay.
If you go to the back to the folder. I'll come back on that anyway. I just want to go back to the main folder. The main folder. No, go to photo 2. I don't know what that shows. I can't remember now. Actually, go to the photo 10. It might be 10. Oh, 9. Photo 9 then. The actual site itself is the bungalow sort of all the way down there. So, as Councillor Reeves explained, this one's not inhabited, but would have, even with the dwellings there, would have 2 parking spaces per site on plot. And then obviously we've got the other bungalows that Councillor Reeves mentioned are not occupied. But there wasn't on-street parking from these other surrounding dwellings, irrespective of that situation. I mean, we're talking about 1 additional space that we'd be requiring as part of the parking standards document, and the impact of that with regards to on-street parking. I mean, officers' view is that it wouldn't be particularly justified reason for refusal for us to try and defend on a hill if we ended up sort of heading that way. That's officer perspective.
May I just add a quick, Chair? One of the things that is mentioned in the report is it's near to the town centre. I don't believe that that is a valid reason for actually okaying the parking, because you've got a gradient going up over the hill to get there. So walking up there, the vast majority of people will not walk. And to say that there's a nearby car parking, etc., it's a fallacy. There isn't.
Right, members.
Sorry, I'm just going to say, so we're talking about only 1 additional space, and it's just the visitor bay. With a lot of minor developments like this, it isn't unreasonable that we normally require that kind of amount necessarily in this kind of park. Anyway.
Councillor Foster, are you going to talk about the refusal, please?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chairman. I'm actually against the refusal proposal, if I may speak. I read the report, Appendix 1, page 10.1.5.13. Describes Hillside Road as an eclectic mix of architectural styles, and there are no requirements in this location to follow distinctly on design. However, point 16 seems to contradict this. It says the proposed development would be detrimental to the character and appearance of the site and the surrounding area. It also says the scale, bulk and layout of the dwellings proposed would not successfully reference the prevailing character of the area, appearing out of keeping to the detriment of the surrounding street scene. So there's a contradiction. Actually, the immediate nearby street scene, could we put up this street plan, please, if you don't mind? Right, that's it. Thank you. The immediate street scene is not particularly attractive if viewed from that site. Directly opposite, which I think is house number 6, is the side of a bungalow with a hedge up to the roof level, and the all that's visible there is a roof covered in solar panels and a very not well maintained chimney. The bungalow below the site has got a tree line inside its own boundary, which runs completely along the site, completely overgrown, hanging over the site. There is a good view from looking across the bend, some nice detached houses, but as it says at the start, it's an eclectic mix of designs. And I'll go on to why that's relevant in a moment. So as you read through the report, it seems to be leading towards recommending approval. Then it comes to the RAMS policy, Essex Recreational Disturbance Avoidance and Mitigation. This means that a development might have adverse effect on designated coastal sites due to additional recreational pressure. The mitigation strategy requires a payment of £127.30 per dwelling, £254.60 in total. So it's hardly additional recreational disturbance. I'll come to that. To conclude, the report recommends refusal for two reasons. The first is the proposed development would create building plots and dwellings which would not successfully reference the prevailing character of the area and would fail to achieve a positive relationship with nearby properties. As I said before, this would seem to contradict the earlier statement, and I quote again, Hillside Road is an eclectic mix of architectural styles and there are no requirements in this location to follow distinctly on design. Therefore, I would suggest this is not a valid reason for refusal. The second reason for refusal is that the application does not include a mechanism to secure suitable mitigation of £254.60 towards RAMS. If this were not rejected, I would suggest it be approved with the condition of the developer making that payment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, members, we've had a motion to refuse it. Can I have a show of hands for the, well, right, we've got to do the amendment first. Then, right, so we've got to vote now for the amendment. If everyone is in approval for the amendment, please. Can I have a show of hands? If you can, or otherwise I'm going to have to extend this meeting. I really don't want to, Claire, because I mean, we're going to have to, right, because otherwise we're going to have to vote for an extension of this meeting. I can't turn around. Right, I can't turn around at the moment. Sorry. You're going to read it out? Just read it. Yeah, you have to read it out, please. God, that was quick. Thank you very much. Right, so can we have a vote on the amendment, please? For?
My apologies. Could you give a clarification on what the amendment is? I'm sorry.
That's it. You just had it, Councillor Williams. It's up there. Just read. That is what. That's what's been read out. That's what we asked to be read out. So again, can I have a show of hands for agreement for the amendment, please? Or against? Abstain? That's carried by 8 to 4. Right. Members, can we now vote on for refusal plus the one we've just done? 4 members voting for the refusal. Against? carried, and it's 10 for, 2 against. Thank you, members. Thank you for this concludes the business at 9:45.